this evening? My name is Miss Pauletta Griggs. But if you had lived with us at the turn of the century, you would have known me as Miss Beauty Griggs. You see, as a child and a young lady, I was in some of the finest plays that were in the Fayetteville area, and everybody said that I was a beautiful actress and a lovely lady, and that is how I got the name of Beauty. Is that not sweet? I just love it. Well, I lived with my daddy's house, which was across the street from the Burke's Motel, but now I believe they call that the Holiday Inn. Are you familiar with that? Well, okay, that was the same place. And I lived there with my old maid sister Harriet. But I can tell you that living with a family member can be very troublesome at times. You see, I had a very fine gentleman friend who lived at the Burke's Motel. But Harriet disapproved of his rather, shall we say, lusty manners. But I came up with a very creative way in which to see my gentleman friend. Sometimes Harriet would have to go to Atlanta for supplies, and we all know that it's an 8-hour buggy ride to Atlanta from Fayetteville. So I would just get my very finest black mixed lingerie, and I would lay it over the rail like so. And when she was gone, my dear friend from the Burke's Motel would know that he could come and pay me a social visit, and Harriet would be none the wiser. Is that clever, Dad? Do you agree? I think that was so smart of me. Oh, gosh. Well, I worked as a milliner in Mr. Robert E. Lee Fife's large mercantile still in the very middle of Fayetteville. And a milliner makes hats out of felt or straw, and then we decorate them with feathers and lace and flowers and pretty pieces of bric-a-brac. And then I would sell my fancy hats to all the fine ladies in Fayetteville that wanted to be the very latest in fashion, as is myself is. Yes, but I can see that I would not make a very good living with this crowd except for these two gentlemen over here. For there is not a hat in sight. I do hope that your dear little heads do not get cold this evening. Well, before you leave, I do have one more request to ask. I am still looking for a fine gentleman who would agree to stay with me for a while, because I tell you, it gets rather lonely over there. Do I have any takers? Any takers? Thank you for coming. I hope you have a nice evening. And don't forget that I'm here if you decide you want to visit.
See, Reagan, red wine. That's right. I'm one of the famous red wines of Fayette County. I was actually born in Henry County in 1889. Married into the red wine family. I married Mr. Hill Parks Redwine of Fayetteville. Oh, he was such a dear, sweet man. We had the best time on our honeymoon. We went to Niagara Falls in New York City. Both of our ancestors had soldiers that served honorably in the war between the states. I dutifully and graciously served in their honor as a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. I even became president of that august group. Well, enough about me for a little while. In the late 1930s, I met and came to endear a famous friend. Would anyone here care to guess who that famous friend might have been? Well, it was none other than Peggy Mitchell. Oh, some of you all may know her as Margaret Mitchell. Well, there came to be a movement here in Fayette County to create a library. When Miss Peggy heard about that idea, oh, she fell in love with it and stood right there by our side. Together, we made a dream become a reality. On the corner of Lee and Stonewall, Miss Margaret Mitchell was in attendance, to gracefully christen the opening of the Margaret Mitchell Library. Oh, she was so proud of that library. On her tragic passing, she bequeathed the library $1,000. Now that may not seem like a lot of cash to you all right now, but believe you me, back in 1949, that was a roll of cash. Well, as time went on, during World War II, while my husband was serving as president of the local bank, I was dutifully serving the Red Cross by making deliveries on my bicycle. I named that bicycle Daisy. Daisy sure was a help to our cause by saving precious money on gasoline during those stressful times. But you're probably wondering why I named my bicycle Daisy. Well, let me tell you. You see, daisies don't kill. And no one knew how many times I fell off that bicycle, but oh, I'm telling you, I sure knew. I was so pleased to be affectionately known as Miss Lucy. People who knew me would say, "There goes Miss Lucy." And people who didn't know me would say, "There goes that bicycle lady." You know, I've often wondered what happened to that bicycle. Maybe it's a word that you all know and use, recycled. That's right. Maybe that bicycle was recycled. Well, anywho, I'm so glad that you all came by this evening. And the next time you all stop by, please call me Miss Lucy.
My name is Charles Davenport Redwine. I was born 6 miles south of here on my father's farm on September 10th, 1884. I attended Fayetteville schools from grammar all the way through high school. That's all the schooling I got. The schoolmaster at that time was the famous George Loon. If you look close enough, you'll find, I believe, he resides here as well. I started my first job as assistant cashier at the Bank of Fayetteville at 17 years old. I was offered the position of cashier at the newly opened Merchants Bank 4 years later. Not only that, but I became president of that bank not too long after that. I married my childhood sweetheart, Clifford. She was beautiful. We had 4 lovely daughters together. Her father owned the Burke's House Hotel here in town. And y'all help me with something here, but did I hear that young lady down there say they call it a Holiday Inn now? Wow. Well, as I lost Clifford only 16 years after he died. I'm sorry. On a happier note, though, I was elected to the city council at the age of 21. And at 22, I was elected mayor. I served 2 terms as mayor. I didn't run for a third, as I had my eye on the House of Representatives. And somehow I managed to serve 3 terms there. I was elected to the state senate in 1960. I served there until 1942. Being elected president of the Senate in 1935. I was the first layman to hold that position. And for you younger folks, a layman is not a lawyer. I ran for the Democratic nomination for governor of Georgia in 1926. But if you know anything about Georgia, you'll know that I was defeated by E.D. Reeves. But I was a conservative my entire life. Funny change of events. I hear that Republicans are conservatives now. The younger generation. Eugene Talmadge was re-elected governor in 1946. But he passed away before taking office. They appointed his son Herman to serve his term. Herman gave me the job of State Revenue Commissioner. I passed from this life on March 8th, 1955. All the schools and businesses closed their doors that night. I was still president of the bank, revenue commissioner, and in my life, I was partnership in 2 cotton mills, 3 private banks, an automobile dealership, a Standard Oil company, a lumber company, and a fertilizer company. Not to mention the local merchandise. I thank y'all so much for coming to visit us tonight. They only let us out once a year. So please, come back next year. Something else to tell you.
6 months, 7 months. There's the way from their ears.
Born in the year of 1843. My parents was Solomon Dorsy and Sarah Glass. I was the oldest son of this family. Now, our family resided in a home that was actually built by John Holiday in the year 1855. It's where we lived from 1867 and 1901. Now, as you can see, I was a soldier of the Civil War of the South, where I served in the Fayetteville Rifle Grays, Georgia 10th Regiment, Company I, at the age of 17. Now, I was a proud color bearer for that company. I carried a flag lovingly made by the hands of the Fayetteville ladies in Dr. Holliday's house in the year of 1861. Anytime we went into battle, this flag went forth. This flag was our spirit. This flag was what we fought for. It was my duty to keep this flag out of the hands of the enemy. I made sure that nobody got to it. There might have been some times that we just about lost it, but I kept that thing safe. Now, I was actually a sharpshooter. On one occasion, in the Battle of Gettysburg, I was wounded in the head. I can't remember where. So if anybody asks, I can't remember where it is. Then in July of 1861, the Cook's Cavalry came to Fayetteville. And once again, I kept that flag safe. They came here, and they came here pretty hard too. Now, when we all surrendered at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia with General Lee's troops, that flag was there. But that flag came back here to Fayette County, where I gave it to my great niece, where she eventually turned it over to the Fayette County Historical Society. Today, that original flag can be seen at the Georgia Archives. And if you actually go to the Dr. Holiday house down here, you can actually see a replica hanging in the hallway. Now, that house that we lived in from 1867 to 1901, well, it was me and my sisters that lived there, Evie and Panola. We lived there until 1901 because my father, which is buried here, he died that year. He was a lieutenant in the Civil War also. I was a private. We moved into a smaller house where my sisters eventually cared for me and where I eventually passed on in the year of 1909. Now, the fun thing about that house is the actual Dorsy family they believe that my spirit still floats around in that house. It's always been said that house is haunted. So any chance y'all get, come on down to that house and see if y'all can find it, or I may find you.
You see, I lived in one of those big houses just down from the courthouse. My daddy gave me that house as a wedding present, but he also gave me a pearl handle pistol. I guess he thought I needed both of them. But he showed me how to use it, and I did. And if I heard something, I was known to shoot. Imagine my surprise one morning when I got up and I realized that I had shot and killed a 350-pound hog that was messing with my trash cans. But now, to my knowledge, I never killed or shot anybody that I know of. Now, I guess I should introduce myself to you. I am Lois Dale Brown Seawright, and I'm 85 years old. Now, people say that if you want to live a long life, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do anything crazy, take care of yourself, you know, be careful. Well, I say that's hard life, because I've been known to do all those things. And here I am. Now, I was born in Shake Rag in 1888. Now, Shake Rag's that little town just west of here, over here. Those uppity people over there now call that Peachtree City. But I got news for you, it's Shake Rag to those of us who were born here. But when I was 7 years old, my daddy moved us into the town of Fayetteville so he could follow his daddy and his granddaddy's footsteps and be the sheriff here. Now, when my daddy was sheriff, oh, it was exciting times. Lots of fun things happened and scary things. I remember when I was 14 years old, my daddy knew that trouble was coming. There was a man he had in the jail, and he heard that there was a whiskey-soaked group of men bound to do something that involved a rope. And he told me to take that prisoner and hide him in our basement. And I did. And I covered him up with a whole pile of dirty clothes. I guess the man thought he'd really come to a low place then. Later on, that man was tried, he was convicted, and he was hanged. But we didn't let that whiskey so crowd do it. Now, I did do some things that were exciting. I loved to go to Atlanta to the old city auditorium and watch the wrestling matches. And if I heard there was a hockey game anywhere, well, I'd go just to see the fights break out. Now, and I knew it was all phony, but I just had such a good time. But I did do a few ladylike things. I loved to fish. And I'm married. And my husband and I would go fishing. Then we'd have a big fish fry, and everybody wanted to come because they were so good. Also, I am, or was, a champion crocheter. And I used to crochet all kinds of things. There are lots of people here in Fayetteville who wear the beautiful, colorful scarves that I used to make for everybody. And if we have a bad winter like we did last year, I guess I better finish this one up for somebody. We had a good time, and my husband and I ran the drugstore in town. It was also the bus stop. And when I found out that they had to have a bus agent, then I applied for the job and got that. And I then knew where everybody went. And that was fun. Some people would get on the bus and go south and go down toward Macon. Some people get on the bus and go north up toward Atlanta. There was one woman here in Denver. She'd come every morning and she'd buy a ticket. She'd go to Atlanta. She would spend the morning in the lobby of the Henry Grady Hotel. That was one of the fine hotels in Atlanta at that time. She'd have lunch, then she'd come home. She did that every day. I guess that was her thing. Now, there are lots of stories that I could tell you that happened, and lots of funny things, but I know you've got to go on. But I want to tell you that if you want to hear some more, just come back, because I can guarantee you I'm going to be here. I've been here since 1979, and you don't think I'm going to leave? Well, be careful as you go off and don't make any noise.
Good evening, y'all. My name is John Henry Holliday, but y'all can call me Doc. I was born about 15 miles up the road in Griffin, Georgia in 1851. And standing here in the cemetery next to the graves of my grandparents, my paternal grandparents, Robert and Rebecca Holliday. And right up the street is the house that my Uncle John built in 1855, where I spent most of my summers. Uncle John was a local physician. Saying that, he taught me how to ride and shoot a gun. One of his employees, Sophie Walton, taught me how to play cards. Uncle John wanted me to amount to something, so he sent me to dental school in Philadelphia School of Dentistry. I played cards there to earn spending money. Got pretty good at it, actually. My intention was to come back to Fayetteville and open a dental practice. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed with consumption, which today we know as TB, at the age of 21, and I moved out west for my health. While there, I met Wyatt Earp and his brothers Morgan and Virgil. We had many great adventures, the most famous of which was the gunfight at the OK Corral, which took place October 26, 1881. Wyatt and I would be what we consider today BFFs. And he credited me with saving his life twice in 2 different gunfights. Unfortunately, I died at a very young age, 36, in 1887, of consumption in a sanitarium in Colorado. But the biggest mystery of my life is my death. No one seems to know where I'm buried. Some people think I'm buried in Tombstone, others think I'm buried in Colorado, and others think I'm buried here in Griffin in one of 2 unmarked graves. I'll let you all ponder that. Any questions for old Doc? One group asked me why I didn't speak like a Southern gentleman. I said, well, when you've been in the ground 127 years, you start to sound like a Yankee.
Husband William settled here after the land lottery of 1821. They drew land and built their family home where it still sits over on Beauregard. Later, William purchased land on Whitewater Creek, where he built Bennett's Mill to grind corn and wheat. Now, it also was a wonderful place for picnics and socials around the pond behind the mill, and we even had baptisms there. In fact, Grandfather donated several parcels of land for such purposes as church sites and cemeteries. In fact, he donated this land right here, and in 1823, it became the city cemetery. Now let me tell you about my father. My father, Cam, settled into the family home, and in 1839, he married my mother, Emily Chappelle Strickland. Father was part of the forces for the Trail of Tears, and he also fought in that great unpleasantness, the war between the states. In fact, while he was away fighting in Virginia, the Yankees came here to Fayetteville. That was about 150 years ago, so I was just a little girl. Now, some of the Yankee troops bivouacked right across the street from our home, and some of them came into our house and started tearing up our mattresses and plundering our things. Oh, well, Mother rushed to the fence and made the Masonic sign of distress. An officer came over and asked how he could help. She told him exactly what his men were doing, and that Father was away, maybe dead, and that she was home with young children. Well, that officer rushed into our home, and he ordered his men to get out. At first, they didn't listen, so he drew his gun, fired once, and yelled, "Out or your life!" Well, those troops just came pouring out of the windows and doors, and they never came back again. I am happy to say my father did return safely from Virginia, and my 8 siblings and I enjoyed a very happy childhood. And we all knew exactly where we'd be buried when our time came. Thank you so much for coming to visit me. Y'all enjoy the rest of you.
Hello, my name is Peggy Marsh. Most people remember me as Margaret Mitchell. I'm here to tell you about my family tonight. I once traveled through Fayetteville quite often. Most times I would come by these graves to make sure they were kept neat and tidy. Let me put down my group. Well, I love a good story, don't you? My great-grandfather, Philip Fitzgerald, I love that name, Philip Fitzgerald, was born in Ireland in 1798. When he was grown, he decided to travel wealthiest man in the area. And he loved at least 3 things: fast horses, a bit of card playing, and a good Irish whiskey. Rather like Gerald O'Hara. Philip was 20 years older than my great-grandmother when they married. They had 7 children. When he died in 1880, he was buried here in the family plot, the walled area right here. Well, I was born not long afterwards, in the turn of the century, 1900. I lived in Atlanta, but I remember as a child, my mother would bring me to a rural home to visit the aging aunts, my grandmother Annie's sisters. While there, I would listen to the stories of veterans who would sit on the porch or ride through the property with me. Those stories gave me so many ideas for a little book I wrote. Do you know the name of it? Yes? Yes, Gone with the Wind. That's exactly right. Speaking of books, I am extremely proud of my involvement helping a group of local women create the first permanent lending library here in Fayetteville. And I was so honored that they named the building the Margaret Mitchell Library. I've heard that the new location is not too far from here. Is that true? Okay. Well, I hope you all frequent it very often. I've also been told they even have talking pictures that you could take home and watch at home. That's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you came by tonight. It was good to meet all of you. Let me just say in closing that I know it can be rather spooky touring through the cemetery. So, if you feel that you may have a bit of trouble falling asleep tonight, I can recommend a very good book.
Miss Hannah, if you aren't just as lovely as a moonbeam on a snowball bush.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Mathew Yates. They call me the Apple Man of Fayette County. I discovered and developed the Yates apple. To you all, it would have been a long time ago. But to old Mather, it was only a basket of bushel or so. I had returned to Sherrill Precinct, South Carolina, fresh from securing our independence from King George. It was a glorious time filled with optimism. I had a mind for adventure. So I set out for new territory and wound up in North Fayette County, Georgia. While walking along Sandy Creek, I discovered a tree full of apples. They tasted so good, I devoted my life's endeavor to their development. You could say I hung my hat on the Yates apple tree. By 1844, I had the old Red Warrior perfected. They call it the Red Warrior because it keeps so well during the winter months. It has graced the table of many a Christmas feast. The Yates is a famous fruit, known for producing the finest cider in all the world. There are still cider mills in production as far north as Michigan. At one time, hundreds of acres in North Fayette County were covered in Yates apple trees. Eat your heart out, Johnny Appleseed. As an original American and a Freemason, I'm proud to have developed such a great American icon. After all, what's more American than apples? The apple has shaped some of the biggest events in history. Take Isaac Newton, for example. He was sitting around in the shade of an apple tree on his lazy duck, trying to figure out how he was going to become famous, when whammo! A big fat apple fell, whacked him right on his nose. That would be his head. Knocked some sense into him, and gravity was discovered. Then there was William Taylor. He was the first to split an arrow using a remote source. I said an arrow. He split an apple using an arrow. That's right, yeah. And before you knew it, some hundreds of years later, Albert Einstein ushered in the atomic age. Well, you might say, what does Einstein have to do with apples? Well, I happen to know he loved apple pie, with a sprinkle of cinnamon and a dash of black pepper. Yeah, we used to call him old Apple Pie Al. Then there was my favorite of all, rotten good. Robin Hood stole apples from the rich. What do you suppose he did with those apples? He ate them. As you know, there are many different kinds of apples. There's a big apple. There's an apple of my eye. There's a bad apple and the rotten apple. And of course, people all the time trying to compare apples to oranges. I hate oranges. Well, they're orange. That brings to mind a story that originated in this fair city of Fayetteville. There once was a ripe young maiden who had many suitors vying for her hand. Amongst these suitors was a doctor. Now, this young maiden didn't cotton to this position, so she pondered the question on how to dispense of him without casting a cloud over the family name. She had noticed that every time she consumed an apple, it gave her gas. So she devised a plan. On the days that the good doctor was scheduled to call, she'd have herself an apple. By and by, after about a bushel or so, the old boy tired of, well, smelling. So was spawned the old adage of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That leads me to the apple tip of the century. Whatever apple you endeavor to go in search of, remember, that apple never falls far from the tree. So go find yourself a basket of Yates apples. Have yourself a bite of American and Fayette County history. You might want to keep some tongues in. Now, as has become customary, I leave you this fine evening with a poem. An original, penned by yours truly, of course. One alter me if I did go walking. It was to my soul I have been talking. Along the river's edge traversing, praising triumphs and failures crossing. Pausing at a flattened place, I did gaze across the water's rippling waves. And what I saw raised my brow, and sends me shivers then and now. Two red eyes were rising, piercing and advertising a devil's errand. I did audit quickly what I had done to warrant such a fiend summon. I did recall a parsley sin, to no more to man offend. 'Tis that I thought nothing more. Well, only of the shallow days of war. Of course, there are those of mystery. Thereby deep, deep inside. To no man they are confessed. There they are, and there they shall rest. Quickened was my pace, and forward was my view. For I knew without an eye of compass, the fiend moved para pursuit. Beyond control, compelled beyond control, I turned my sight to behold the sun setting below the waves, pulling the ghastly gaze of the dual-eyed fiend into the darkness. What living air I did inhale, INHELL, as I celebrated my reprieve. What of this devil-eyed fiend? What time and company does it keep? Was it Satan I had seen? My soul he sought to reap? What crisp autumn air did wash my face? I will ponder all questions on the morrow. I must enjoy the evening.
My husband Henry was born into slavery. In the year about 1850 or so, he was kidnapped. He was brought here to the state of Georgia from Virginia by men who had offered him a piece of candy. In an auction in Newton, he was sold to Mr. Arnold. Well, after the Great Emancipation, Henry kept Mr. Arnold's name, and he stayed on the estate. Well, when Henry saw me, I knew he would be led, even if I was from Fayetteville. Henry and I had a fine large family. We had seven children. Our son, Arthur, was born in 1881 and raised in our home just across from the Whitewater Bridge from the Cox place. He had his schooling
at Flat Rock and Arnold Grove. In 1903, he married Miss Ari Blaylock. For a while, Arthur helped Henry farm the 240 acres owned by Sheldon Dorsy. Arthur started with just a single mule, but he ended up with 2 mules and a horse. He raised cotton like everyone else and some farm crops. He drove his old Model T car to Atlanta to sell his items. Arthur stayed on the land for 36 years. Now, Arthur's father-in-law was a blacksmith. He taught him all about the trade. When his father-in-law passed, Arthur took up the business. But Arthur had shod mules and horses and even doctored cows in almost every pasture in this county. When plowing time came, he would be called, and sometimes they would have him up to 20 mules in a shop. Well, Arthur could do it in one day. He was given 75 cents for each mule. Arthur was a popular preacher at the Edgefield Baptist Church. When he passed in 1986, he was 105 years old. He was the last participating blacksmith in this county, and everyone knew him because he loved to wear his World War I hat. This is my family story, and I'm proud to share it with you. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you.